Hi, this is Dr. John Schinnerer with Guide to Self and a brief presentation on how can I get rid of anxiety. Number 3. Assuming you have an anxiety disorder and not a medical condition or a substance abuse-induced anxiety, there are 5 major approaches that can be of help to you. Number 1 is psychological therapy. This includes cognitive behavioral therapy, also known as CBT, exposure therapy, or insight-oriented therapy. All these have been shown in research to help reduce anxiety. Second, there are a number of medications out there, antidepressants, benzodiazepines, or other medications which are newer that can help reduce your level of anxiety. Be aware that the benzodiazepines can be a little bit dangerous if you use them long term. Recent studies show that they can impact your long-term memory if you're using benzos for a long period of time, and they're also habit forming. Third, there's a number of alternative treatments that have been shown in studies to have a positive impact on anxiety. One of the biggest ones is learning mindfulness. Another one is relaxation techniques, such as progressive muscle relaxation or deep breathing. Another one is transcranial magnetic stimulation, where they apply magnets to the outside of the scalp and they can stimulate certain areas of the brain, thereby reducing anxiety. And there's several more as well. A fourth one is exercise. One of my clients who has a severe anxiety swears by an intense aerobic exercise every morning. And this guy tends to go to town and do 2 hours of exercise every day, which might be a little bit much, but his idea of intense aerobic exercise is spot on. I tell my clients aerobic exercise for anxiety, weightlifting or anaerobic exercise for something like anger. And finally, there's nutrition and diet. You want to be aware of what you're eating and what you're putting in your body to make sure that it's functioning at peak capacity. So my anxiety course focuses primarily on CBT-based interventions and those alternative treatments that have a good research base to support their effectiveness with anxiety. And this includes topics like mindfulness, progressive muscle relaxation, self-compassion, forgiveness, and more. Now, the suffering you experience from anxiety is largely embodied. So when I first started out in psychology, I didn't really understand this. I was more of the understanding like Rene Descartes, who said, "I think, therefore I am." I was looking for emotions when I was younger in my head. Most emotions are not predominantly in your head, although they do fuel thoughts that show up in your head. Most emotions show up in your body. This means anxiety is experienced mostly in your body. So there's a chest tightening, there's shortness of breath, there's racing thoughts fueled by your anxiety, there's perspiration, there's muscle tension, often in your neck and shoulders, there's dryness in your mouth, and so on. So by understanding the physical mechanisms of anxiety, you will ultimately gain a greater sense of mastery over it, you can get some distance from it, and ideally suffer less. So how does anxiety begin? Well, much of it is due to the overactivity of the sympathetic nervous system, or SNS. If the body's similar to a car, the SNS is like the gas pedal, which we're really good at pushing on to accelerate the car. In this day and age, we are primed to step on the gas. We are experts at getting amped, anxious, and stressed. We pride ourselves on it. I mean, the degree to which you're stressed and overworked is an indicator of how important you are. So be aware of that dynamic. So again, what happens when you begin to get anxious? Well, an event takes place which you look at as a threat. Maybe a dog chases you. Maybe a coworker criticizes your work. And then your internal alarms go off. Social and emotional events hit just as hard as physical pain because many of the same neural circuits in our brain are involved in all three. So studies have shown that being excluded from a group fires up the same neural networks as getting kicked in the shin. Even simply anticipating a negative future event, like thinking about going to the dentist for a filling, can have a similar impact as living through it in the moment. So, a threat arises, real or imagined, and the amygdala sounds the alarm, kicking into action 3 areas. The sympathetic nervous system alerts your major organs and muscle groups to prepare to fight or flee. The thalamus, a relay station in the center of your brain, alerts the brainstem to stand ready. In turn, the brainstem releases norepinephrine throughout the brain, kicking it into high gear. Next, the hypothalamus, the brain's main hormone regulator, tells the pituitary gland to have the adrenal glands release stress hormones, adrenaline and cortisol. This leads to an increase in heart rate, pupil dilation, blood is immediately shunted to your major muscle groups, the immune system response is suppressed so that any inflammation you have from any attack or wounds you get is reduced, saliva in your mouth dries up, your digestion slows, your emotions intensify, and you are primed to process all negative information around you. And all of this happens within 1 to 2 seconds, which is pretty amazing that our body can do that. We just need to learn how to turn it off sometimes as well. So the cortisol increases stress responses in a self-reinforcing circle, and this is one of the problems, because cortisol makes the brainstem stimulate the amygdala more and more, which increases activity in the sympathetic nervous system, which in turn produces more cortisol. Then cortisol inhibits the hippocampus, which usually calms things down, and the amygdala just keeps on churning out cortisol. It's kind of like being in an old muscle car with bad brakes. It's really quick to get up to speed, but really hard to slow it down. And the stress sets you up to feel more anxiety, fear, and anger. And as the stress response accelerates, your interpretations of other people's actions get increasingly negative. Like, oh man, this guy doesn't know how to drive. Or, oh my God, my son is lying in a ditch somewhere. So you tend to jump on the worst possible interpretation of what's happening or what people are doing to you. And this fuels further negative emotions. So it's sort of like we're living in an internet world with Windows 1.0 as our system software. Back in the day when we lived as tribes in caves, this system worked well for us because it kept us alive. But today, our brain and body respond to far too many things as life or death threats, often without the slightest bit of our awareness. And one of the major problems is living with chronic stress and anxiety. In the short term, both stress and anxiety can do us well. They prompt us to take action. They alert us to things we need to do. But in the long run, however, chronic stress can lead to gastrointestinal issues, cardiovascular problems, immune system issues, endocrine problems, and mental health problems. In our next video, I will discuss how to hit the brakes on the car, tools that you can use to turn down the volume on your anxiety and activate your relaxation response. Thank you so much for your interest. This is Dr. John Schinnerer at Guide to Self. Again, for more tools to manage anxiety, check out the full 6-week course at guidetoself.com. It's $147 for fully downloadable videos, exercises, and much more. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.